The moment of abandonment, a three-legged miracle's journey begins. The supermarket parking lot was a flurry of movement, carts rattling, children laughing, hurried shoppers clutching their bags against the chilly breeze. No one noticed the tiny, trembling figure huddled inside a worn cardboard box near the entrance, his whimpers drowned beneath the hum of daily life. The little pup, barely the size of a loaf of bread, pressed his frail body against the rough interior of the box, seeking warmth that wasn't there. Don't forget to subscribe Amazing Dog Stories and hit the notification bell for more incredible stories. T-Rex, as he would later be named, was no ordinary puppy. Born with a deformed front leg, his small body bore the weight of rejection even before he had a chance to know love. His breeder, a man with more concern for profit than compassion, had tried to sell him as if he were a defective product on clearance. Passersby spared only brief glances, their expressions flickering between pity and disinterest. No one wanted a damaged puppy. No one wanted the responsibility. The man selling him grew impatient. His earlier enthusiasm, marked by calls of "get a puppy," purebred, cheap, had turned into frustration. He scowled, looking at his last unsold pup, the one he couldn't market as perfect. With a huff, he kicked the box slightly, making the puppy yelp in fear. T-Rex curled into himself, trembling as his little heart pounded. The man muttered under his breath, and with one final glance, turned and walked away, leaving the box behind as if discarding an unwanted piece of trash. For the first time in his short life, T-Rex was truly alone. The minutes passed. Then an hour. The sun dipped lower, casting golden streaks across the asphalt. The temperature dropped, and the pup whimpered, his tiny form shivering. His belly ached with hunger, but even more than that, he craved comfort. People walked past, some sparing a glance, others too caught up in their errands to notice. No one stopped. No one cared. Until her. Margaret Davis was not in a hurry. She had learned, after 65 years, that life was best lived at a pace where you could notice the details others missed. As she exited the store, balancing a bag of groceries in one arm, she heard a soft, desperate whimper. A sound so faint it barely rose above the wind. She paused. Turning her head, her keen eyes scanned the lot. Then she saw it. A tattered box, nearly flattened against the pavement. And inside it, a puppy, small and frail, his fur matted and dirty, his eyes wide with fear. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, setting down her groceries. Kneeling, she reached toward him, her heart aching at the sight of his pitiful state. The little pup flinched at first, but when her warm fingers brushed against his fur, he let out a sigh, as if realizing finally that someone had come for him. Margaret lifted him carefully, cradling his fragile body against her chest. His heartbeat fluttered against her hand, quick and uncertain. She could feel his ribs beneath his fur, his body far too light for a puppy his age. But it was his leg that caught her attention, his front right limb curled unnaturally, useless. A deformity that had doomed him in the eyes of those who had abandoned him. "Well now, that doesn't make you any less precious," she murmured, stroking his tiny head. "You've got fight in you, don't you?" The puppy, as if understanding, nestled into her warmth, his trembling easing ever so slightly. Margaret let out a deep breath. This wasn't just a stray. This was fate. Margaret had always believed that life had a way of placing the right souls in your path at the right time. And as she held the trembling, abandoned pup in her arms, she knew one thing for certain: T-Rex's story was far from over. It was only just beginning. With determined steps, she gathered her groceries and walked toward her car, whispering to the pup as she went, promising him a future far brighter than his past. And in that moment, T-Rex, the tiny three-legged miracle, had found his home. The animal shelter, a glimmer of hope. T-Rex had never known true comfort. His world had been a cold, hard box in a supermarket parking lot, a blur of strangers walking past without a second glance. But now, his tiny body rested on a soft blanket inside a metal enclosure. The air smelled of kibble and antiseptic, the distant barking of other dogs echoing through the long hallways. This was the shelter, a place meant for second chances. Yet, for a dog like T-Rex, missing one leg and so small, his future seemed uncertain. The volunteers walked past his enclosure, glancing inside with sympathetic eyes. Most of the other dogs barked and jumped excitedly, vying for attention. But T-Rex? He sat quietly, his round, dark eyes scanning the room, uncertain and wary. He had already learned that excitement didn't always lead to kindness. "Poor little guy," one of the volunteers murmured, kneeling beside his cage. "He's just a baby. But with his leg missing, who's gonna want him?" Another volunteer sighed, glancing at a clipboard. "We can list him on the special needs adoption page. But let's be honest, most people want a perfect dog. He might be here a long time." T-Rex didn't understand their words, but he felt the weight of their sadness. He curled up tighter on his blanket, letting out a small sigh. He'd already been unwanted once. Would it happen again? Then, everything changed. The bell at the front of the shelter rang, signaling a visitor. A woman walked in, her eyes scanning the kennels with purpose. Karen Rogers had been coming to the shelter for years, fostering dogs who needed a little extra love before finding their forever homes. But something about today felt different. She wasn't just looking for another foster case, she was searching for something more. As she walked past rows of eager, jumping dogs, her gaze landed on a small, quiet figure in the back. A puppy, sitting still as stone, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. A puppy missing a leg. Karen's heart clenched. There was something about him, something she couldn't walk away from. She knelt down beside his enclosure, pressing her fingers gently against the bars. "Well, hello there," she whispered, her voice soft, inviting. T-Rex blinked at her, his little nose twitching as he sniffed the air. One of the volunteers approached her, clearing his throat. "That's T-Rex. He was abandoned outside a grocery store a few days ago." Karen's brows furrowed in sorrow. Who would do such a thing? The volunteer shrugged, looking down at the small dog. "We're worried about his adoption chances. Most people pass over dogs with disabilities." Karen didn't hesitate. "I'll foster him." The words were out of her mouth before she had even fully thought them through. But something deep inside her knew this little soul needed her. And maybe, just maybe, she needed him too. The paperwork was processed quickly, and soon, Karen found herself carrying T-Rex to her car, his tiny body wrapped in a warm blanket. He was stiff in her arms at first, unsure, but the gentle rhythm of her heartbeat beneath his head was soothing. It was the first time in his short life that he felt truly safe. Back at Karen's home, T-Rex was introduced to a world he had never known before. Soft rugs replaced the cold pavement he had once huddled on. A warm bed sat in the corner of the living room, waiting just for him. And most importantly, love surrounded him. Karen moved with patience, allowing him time to explore, to sniff, to understand that this place was his sanctuary. That first night, T-Rex hesitated before stepping into his new bed. He turned his head, looking up at Karen, who sat on the couch watching him with a soft smile. "It's okay, little one," she assured him. "You're safe now." With a deep breath, T-Rex curled up in the bed, his tiny body sinking into the warmth. He let out a small, content sigh. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged. As the days passed, something incredible happened. T-Rex, once fearful and hesitant, began to trust. He learned the sound of Karen's voice, the feeling of her touch, the comfort of knowing food would always be there. His missing leg didn't stop him from hopping around the house, from chasing after toys, from learning that life could be full of joy. Karen watched in awe as his spirit flourished. "You're not just a survivor, are you?" she murmured one afternoon, stroking his soft fur as he rested in her lap. "You're a fighter, a little warrior." T-Rex nuzzled into her hand, his tiny tail wagging. He didn't know the words, but he understood the love behind them. But as much as Karen had saved him, she soon realized something: T-Rex was saving her too. Before T-Rex, Karen had been living in quiet solitude. She'd always loved fostering dogs, but lately, there had been an emptiness in her life, a loneliness she hadn't wanted to acknowledge. But now, with a small, three-legged puppy curled up beside her, that loneliness was fading. He filled her days with purpose, with laughter, with unconditional love. And Karen knew this wasn't just a temporary arrangement. T-Rex wasn't just another foster case. He was home. This was just the beginning of T-Rex's journey. What lay ahead would be even more remarkable, as this once abandoned puppy grew into a beacon of hope for others. But for now, in the safety of Karen's home, he could finally rest, knowing he was loved. Karen's home, the road to recovery. The first night in Karen's home was one of uncertainty for T-Rex. His tiny body, still sore from the surgeries, trembled as he curled up in the softest blanket Karen had found for him. The other dogs in the house, sensing his fragility, watched curiously from a distance, their tails wagging with gentle curiosity. He had never known a home, never felt the warmth of a family, but something deep inside told him he was safe now. Karen sat beside him, stroking his fur with reassuring hands, whispering soft words of encouragement. "You're going to be okay, little one. You're home now." The struggles of adaptation. The next morning, T-Rex's journey to recovery truly began. The first challenge? Learning to walk with only 3 legs. His first attempt was heartbreaking. He wobbled, his tiny frame struggling to maintain balance. His stump, still healing, gave out beneath him, sending him toppling onto the carpet. He let out a soft whimper of frustration, his eyes wide with confusion. Karen knelt beside him, holding him steady. "It's okay, sweetheart. One step at a time." For the next several days, she worked with him patiently, encouraging every tiny step. She supported his weight with her hands, rewarding every attempt with gentle praise and small treats. Each day brought a little more progress. First, he managed to stand longer. Then, he took a few shaky steps. Then, a few more. His resilience was nothing short of extraordinary. Despite his falls, despite the exhaustion, T-Rex refused to give up. By the end of the second week, he was moving on his own, albeit slowly. His eyes sparkled with determination, and Karen saw it clearly. This puppy wasn't just surviving. He was thriving. A newfound joy. One bright afternoon, about a month into his recovery, something incredible happened. Karen sat on the porch, sipping her coffee, watching as T-Rex sniffed curiously around the yard. He was stronger now, his movements more confident. Then, without warning, he took off. It wasn't perfect. His gait was still a little unsteady, but there was no mistaking it. He was running. Karen gasped, her heart swelling with pride and emotion. The other dogs perked up, then raced alongside him. T-Rex barked with joy, his tail wagging furiously. For the first time, he was free. Tears welled in Karen's eyes as she watched him sprint across the grass, the wind in his fur, his tongue hanging out in sheer happiness. He was no longer the abandoned, fragile puppy from the grocery store parking lot. He was a fighter, a survivor. The bonds of family. Karen's other dogs quickly accepted T-Rex as one of their own. At first, they were gentle, sensing his delicate state, but as he grew stronger, they invited him to play. His favorite game? Tug of war. Despite his size, T-Rex was fierce when he gripped the rope, growling playfully as he wrestled against his much larger siblings. He never backed down, and often he won. One evening, Karen found him curled up beside Daisy, the oldest and wisest of her dogs, a golden retriever who had always been the nurturing type. She licked his ear affectionately, as if to say, "You belong here now." T-Rex sighed in contentment and drifted off to sleep, safe and warm in his new family's embrace. A heart full of love. Weeks turned into months, and T-Rex's transformation continued. He became stronger, more confident, more full of life. Everywhere he went, he brought joy. Whether it was cuddling with Karen on the couch, chasing butterflies in the yard, or greeting every visitor with an excited bark, his happiness was contagious. But Karen knew his journey wasn't over. This special little dog was destined for something greater. One afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Karen gently scratched behind his ears. "You know, T-Rex," she murmured, "I think you were meant to do something special. To help others, just like you've helped me." T-Rex wagged his tail as if he understood. Little did he know, his greatest adventure was just beginning. Karen's quiet evenings, a comfort during grief. The rain drummed softly against the window pane, casting a rhythmic lullaby over the quiet house. Outside, the sky was a deep gray, mirroring the weight in Karen's heart. She sat at her computer desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, the glow from the screen illuminating the unshed tears in her eyes. Tonight was one of those nights, the kind where grief whispered through the walls, filling every corner of the home with echoes of the past. It had been months since her mother had passed, yet the pain still clung to her like a shadow. She reached for the old, worn photograph resting beside her keyboard, a picture of her mother, smiling warmly, her eyes full of life. A deep sigh escaped her lips as she pressed the picture to her chest, closing her eyes. And then, as if sensing her pain, a gentle weight settled against her lap. Karen looked down to see T-Rex, his small body curled up against her, his deep brown eyes gazing at her with unwavering devotion. He nuzzled his wet nose into her hand, offering silent comfort. His usual boundless energy was absent. Instead, he remained still, as if knowing that at this moment, all she needed was his presence. Karen let out a shaky breath and ran her fingers through his soft fur. "You always know, don't you, buddy?" she whispered. T-Rex didn't need words to respond. He simply pressed closer, his warmth seeping into her, grounding her. The nights had been the hardest. When the world was quiet, the memories of her mother felt the loudest. But somehow, T-Rex had become her anchor. He never left her side, never demanded anything from her. He was just there, a steady presence in the storm of her sorrow. Karen stroked his back, remembering the day she had brought him home. He had been fragile then, uncertain of his place in the world. Now, he had grown into something so much more. Not just a survivor, but a healer. As the rain continued to patter against the window, Karen let herself lean into the comfort of the moment. The warmth of T-Rex, the soft hum of the house, the memory of her mother's love, it all mixed together, weaving a new kind of peace. A reminder that even in loss, there was still love to be found. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to carry her through. A new purpose. The days slowly turned into weeks, and Karen found herself relying more on T-Rex's quiet support. His ability to sense her moods, to comfort her without words, fascinated her. It made her wonder, could he do the same for others? One evening, as she sipped tea and scrolled through local community forums, an idea sparked in her mind. She had read about therapy dogs before, how they provided emotional support to those in hospitals, nursing homes, and rehabilitation centers. Karen glanced down at T-Rex, who was lazily sprawled across the couch, his head resting on her lap. "What do you think, buddy? Want to help others the way you help me?" she murmured, scratching behind his ears. His tail thumped against the cushion, as if he understood. That night, Karen stayed up researching therapy dog training programs. She learned that despite T-Rex's missing leg, he could still qualify if he passed temperament and behavior assessments. He was already naturally affectionate and patient, qualities that made therapy dogs so effective. The next morning, she made the call. Training for a new life. The first day of training, Karen felt a tinge of nervousness. She had always known T-Rex was special, but would he be able to handle the structured requirements of therapy work? The trainer, an older man named Jeff, smiled as he observed T-Rex greeting the other dogs. "He's got a good spirit," he noted. "Therapy dogs aren't about perfection, they're about heart. And from what I can see, he's got plenty of that." The training sessions were both challenging and rewarding. T-Rex learned how to stay calm in unfamiliar environments, how to respond to gentle commands, and how to navigate around medical equipment and wheelchairs. The biggest challenge was getting him to resist his natural excitement. When meeting new people, he had a tendency to shower them with enthusiastic kisses. "We'll work on it," Karen laughed as she wiped dog slobber from her face after yet another exuberant greeting. Over time, T-Rex began to master his new skills. His ability to sense emotions became even more refined. During one session at a local rehabilitation center, he gravitated toward an elderly woman in a wheelchair, resting his head gently on her lap. She hadn't spoken much since her stroke, but as she stroked his fur, tears welled up in her eyes. "She hasn't reacted like that to anything in weeks," a nurse whispered to Karen. T-Rex had found his purpose, bringing joy to those who need it most. The day T-Rex officially became a certified therapy dog, Karen felt a swell of pride. The once abandoned puppy who had been discarded in a grocery store parking lot had now become a source of healing for so many. His work took him to children's hospitals, where young patients giggled as they petted his soft fur, momentarily forgetting their pain. He visited nursing homes, where residents reminisced about dogs they had loved in their youth, their wrinkled hands shaking slightly as they caressed his head. And every time he returned home, he was still Karen's loyal companion, the same dog who had laid beside her on those lonely nights, reminding her that love endures. One evening, after a particularly emotional visit to a hospice center, Karen sat on the porch with T-Rex by her side. The stars twinkled above, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees. "You've done so much, buddy," she murmured, scratching behind his ears. "You turned all that pain into something beautiful." T-Rex let out a soft sigh, as if he understood. As Karen looked out at the peaceful night, she realized something. Grief didn't disappear, but love had a way of filling the empty spaces it left behind. And thanks to T-Rex, her heart, once weighed down by loss, now had room for hope. The legacy of love. As word spread about T-Rex's journey, Karen was approached by a local news station. They wanted to feature his story from the abandoned puppy in the grocery store parking lot to the therapy dog bringing comfort to so many. The segment aired on a Sunday evening, and Karen was overwhelmed by the response. Messages poured in from people who had been touched by T-Rex's journey, sharing their own experiences with loss, resilience, and the healing power of animals. Inspired by T-Rex's impact, Karen started a small foundation in his name, dedicated to rescuing and training special needs dogs for therapy work. Through it all, T-Rex remained the same sweet, loving dog who had once curled up in her lap during her darkest nights. A symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope, a reminder that love, no matter how broken, could always be made whole again. And so, with every visit, every gentle touch, every moment of comfort he provided, T-Rex continued his quiet mission, not just as a therapy dog, but as a healer of hearts. The Pause for Love Gala T-Rex the Philanthropist. The grand ballroom of the Hilton Hotel was transformed into an elegant yet heartwarming scene. Soft golden lights flickered from crystal chandeliers, casting a warm glow on the decorated tables where guests sat in anticipation. The annual Pause for Love Gala had always been a highlight for the community, an event where animal lovers gathered to celebrate resilience, raise money for shelters, and showcase the remarkable talents of rescued pets. Tonight, among the many honored guests, there was one special four-legged attendee who was about to steal the show. T-Rex stood proudly beside Karen, his three-legged frame wrapped in a tiny tuxedo with a blue bow tie. His tail wagged excitedly as he took in the sights, his eyes filled with curiosity. Unlike many of the other rescue dogs who were prepped for the evening's main event creating art pieces with their paws, T-Rex had a different challenge. He couldn't dip his front paws into paint and walk across the canvas like the others. But if life had taught him anything, it was that limitations were only stepping stones to innovation. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the hall as attendees mingled, sipping on champagne and bidding on silent auction items. The highlight of the night, however, was the live art session where the rescue dogs would create their masterpieces in real time. A portion of the funds raised would go directly to the shelter that had saved T-Rex, ensuring that more dogs like him would be given a second chance. Karen knelt beside him, stroking his head gently. "Are you ready, buddy?" she whispered. T-Rex looked up at her, his tail thumping against the floor. That's when Karen had an idea. A mischievous smile crossed her face as she reached for a small tray of brightly colored, non-toxic paint. Instead of using his paws, she dipped his wagging tail into the vibrant hues, blues, reds, and yellows before guiding him toward the canvas. The audience gasped as Karen gave a gentle command. "Paint, T-Rex." And just like that, he did. His tail swished back and forth, flicking streaks of color onto the white canvas. With each enthusiastic wag, a new pattern emerged, abstract yet full of life, energy, and unmistakable joy. The entire room erupted into cheers and applause as the once-abandoned puppy-turned-beloved philanthropist worked his magic, creating a masterpiece that was uniquely his own. The event host, a well-known news anchor, stepped up to the microphone, unable to contain his amazement. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing here tonight is something truly special. T-Rex is not just painting, he is proving that resilience knows no bounds. He has turned his perceived limitation into a work of art, reminding us all that obstacles are just opportunities in disguise. The painting, still wet with fresh paint, was set on an easel at the front of the room. Almost immediately, bidding began. Hands shot up in the air as people competed for the one-of-a-kind piece created by a dog whose story had touched so many hearts. The numbers climbed higher and higher: $1,000, then $2,000, then $5,000. Karen wiped away a tear as she watched the auction unfold. Just a year ago, T-Rex had been left to die in a grocery store parking lot, his deformity deemed a flaw that made him unworthy of love. And now, here he was, raising thousands of dollars to help other animals in need. $10,000. A voice called from the back of the room. The crowd gasped, turning to see an elderly gentleman in a navy blue suit, his eyes glistening with emotion. "This dog's story reminds me of my late wife," he explained. "She always believed that the greatest art comes from the most unexpected places. I want this painting as a tribute to her." Silence hung in the air for a moment before the host announced sold for $10,000. The room erupted into applause as T-Rex barked happily, unaware of just how much of an impact he had made that night. As the event wrapped up, guests approached Karen, sharing their admiration for T-Rex and his journey. Many of them had faced their own struggles: loss, illness, personal setbacks, and seeing T-Rex thrive despite his challenges gave them hope. A woman in a wheelchair rolled up beside Karen, her golden retriever service dog sitting attentively by her side. "I was paralyzed in an accident 5 years ago," she said softly. "For a long time, I thought my life was over. But seeing T-Rex tonight, he reminded me that we are not defined by what we've lost, but by how we choose to move forward." Karen placed a hand over her heart, deeply moved. "That's exactly why I adopted him. He teaches me something new every day." As she and T-Rex prepared to leave, the event coordinator approached them. "Karen, we have a proposal," she began. "T-Rex has touched so many lives tonight. We'd love for him to become the official ambassador for next year's gala. He represents everything this event stands for: strength, resilience, and the ability to overcome." Karen looked down at T-Rex, who was now curled up at her feet, his tuxedo slightly askew. She smiled. "I think he'd love that." As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Karen crouched beside him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "You did it, T-Rex," she whispered. "You turned your pain into purpose. And you changed lives tonight." The little dog wagged his tail, nuzzling into her palm. He had found his home, his family, and now his purpose. From an abandoned puppy left in a grocery store parking lot to a celebrated philanthropist, his journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. A beach outing, the joy of freedom. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden hues over the vast expanse of sand and sea. The rhythmic melody of waves crashing against the shore filled the air, blending seamlessly with the laughter of children and the distant calls of seagulls. The salty breeze carried with it the promise of adventure, a perfect day for T-Rex to experience yet another milestone in his incredible journey. Karen pulled into the parking lot, the trunk of her car packed with beach towels, a picnic basket, and T-Rex's favorite chew toy. As she turned to unclip his harness, she couldn't help but smile. His eyes sparkled with excitement, his tail wagging furiously, tapping against the seat. This was his first visit to the beach, and she wanted it to be special. She opened the door, and before she could even give him the signal, T-Rex leapt out, his 3 legs moving with determined energy. The sand was warm beneath his paws, unfamiliar yet inviting. He took a few hesitant steps, then sniffed the air as if sensing something exhilarating just beyond the dunes. And then, as if suddenly understanding what lay ahead, he took off running. Karen gasped, placing a hand over her mouth as she watched him go. For a moment, she held her breath, afraid he might stumble, but he didn't. He raced across the beach, his lean body moving with effortless grace, each stride filled with joy and liberation. His missing leg no longer seemed like a limitation. It was simply a part of him, as natural as the ocean waves. Nearby beachgoers stopped to watch. Children pointed, their eyes wide with wonder. A jogger slowed her pace, captivated by the sight of the 3-legged dog dashing across the sand with uncontainable enthusiasm. Even a lifeguard perched in his tower paused, smiling at the sight. Karen finally exhaled, tears forming in her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, laughing to herself. She had always believed in T-Rex, but seeing him like this, so free, so alive, it was more than she had ever imagined. T-Rex ran to the edge of the water, where the waves licked at his paws, then turned to look at Karen, his tail wagging wildly. He barked once, an invitation, before bounding back towards her. As he neared, he skidded to a stop, sending a spray of sand flying into the air. Karen laughed, dropping to her knees to meet him. He licked her face excitedly, as if trying to share his joy with her. "You love it here, don't you?" she whispered, scratching behind his ears. His response was another bark and a playful nudge against her shoulder. A group of beachgoers had gathered nearby, drawn by the infectious energy of the moment. One woman, an older lady with kind eyes, knelt down and extended her hand toward T-Rex. "He's incredible," she murmured, as T-Rex sniffed her fingers before giving her an affectionate lick. "What's his story?" Karen hesitated for a moment, then smiled. She never tired of telling his story, not because of the hardships he had endured, but because of the hope and inspiration it carried. She began recounting his journey, from the cold, heartless abandonment outside the grocery store to the warm, loving home he had found with her. She spoke of the surgeries, the pain, the resilience, and, ultimately, the triumph. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the small circle that had formed around them. A teenage boy, sitting cross-legged in the sand, wiped at his eyes. "I have a little sister who was born with a disability," he said softly. "She's always been afraid to try new things because she thinks people will judge her. But I think I'm going to show her a video of T-Rex. Maybe she'll see that being different doesn't mean you can't be amazing." Karen's heart swelled. She reached out and squeezed the boy's shoulder. That's the beauty of T-Rex's story. He doesn't know he's different. He just knows he wants to live, to love, and to run. And that's all that matters. More people shared their own stories of struggle and perseverance. A man who had recently lost his leg to an accident expressed how watching T-Rex filled him with renewed hope. A woman who had been hesitant about adopting a senior dog said she now felt ready to open her home to one in need. What had started as a simple trip to the beach had turned into something much bigger, a moment of connection, of understanding, of shared humanity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Karen sat with T-Rex by her side, watching the tide roll in. The ocean had a way of washing away burdens, of making the world feel new again. And in that moment, she realized something profound. T-Rex wasn't just her dog. He was a symbol of resilience, of overcoming the odds, of choosing joy despite the challenges. And he wasn't just changing her life, he was changing everyone's life that he touched. With a deep sigh of contentment, Karen ruffled T-Rex's fur. "Ready to head home, buddy?" she asked. T-Rex looked up at her, his big, soulful eyes reflecting the last light of the day. And then, with one last excited bark, he took off running again, leaving a trail of paw prints in the sand, a testament to a journey not defined by what was missing, but by the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The story of T-Rex is a powerful testament to resilience, love, and the ability to turn adversity into inspiration. In many ways, his journey mirrors the challenges we all face in life, whether it's dealing with loss, rejection, or setbacks that make us feel broken. Like T-Rex, we may find ourselves abandoned in moments of despair, struggling to find our place in the world. But his story teaches us that even when we are at our lowest, there is always hope. It reminds us that kindness from the right people can change our fate, just as Karen's love transformed T-Rex's life. In today's fast-paced world, where difficulties can sometimes feel overwhelming, we must remember that our struggles do not define us, our response to them does. We can choose to keep moving forward, even if we have to adapt, just as T-Rex learned to run with 3 legs. His ability to find joy, love, and purpose, despite his hardship, shows that limitations are only as powerful as we allow them to be. Applying this to our lives means embracing our challenges instead of being defeated by them. It means supporting others who are struggling, just as Karen did, and recognizing that even small acts of kindness can create ripples of change. When life takes something away from us, we can choose to focus on what remains and make the most of it. Like T-Rex, we can find new ways to bring joy to ourselves and others, turning pain into purpose. Whether through resilience, compassion, or a simple wag of the tail, the lesson is clear: every life has value, and no obstacle is too great to overcome with love and determination. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that capture the deep and powerful connection between humans and animals. Don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Together, let's celebrate the extraordinary bonds that remind us of the love, loyalty, and resilience that make these stories unforgettable. Join us tomorrow for another heartwarming journey you won't want to miss.